Have you ever had a moment where reality felt slightly wrong? Not terrifying, not dramatic, just slightly off. You walked into your room and something felt different, even though everything looked almost the same. You glanced at the clock, looked away for what felt like a few seconds, and somehow 20 minutes had passed. You felt chills run through your body for no obvious reason. You remembered an object being in one place, but suddenly it was somewhere else. You heard someone say something, and for a split second your entire body reacted like it had already lived that moment before. And maybe you brushed it off. Maybe you told yourself, "I'm just tired. I'm overthinking. It's stress. It's nothing." But deep down, something in you knew. There are moments when the fabric of your personal reality begins to loosen, not because the world is breaking, but because your relationship to reality is changing. Welcome to Transmutation Vortex. Today, we are exploring the glitch in your reality, 5 signs you're shifting timelines without realizing it. This episode is for those who have felt the strange chills, the missing time, the déjà vu, the sudden emotional disconnection from old places, old people, old habits, and old versions of themselves. This is for the ones who have noticed small details changing overnight, the ones who feel like their life is quietly rearranging itself behind the scenes, the ones who are not necessarily trying to shift timelines, but can feel that something is already shifting. And today, we are not going to approach this only from fantasy or spiritual language. We are going to bridge mysticism with quantum terminology, quantum superposition, wave function collapse, the observer effect, frequency alignment, energetic probability, and conscious selection. Now, before we go deeper, let's ground this clearly. Quantum mechanics does not scientifically prove that your personal life is jumping between timelines in the way movies show it. But the language of quantum theory gives us a powerful symbolic framework for understanding how consciousness, attention, choice, and identity may interact with the possibilities available to us. So, in this video, we are working with a mystical interpretation of quantum ideas. We are using science-inspired language as a bridge into spiritual transformation. Because sometimes, the most important truth is not whether reality changed around you first. Sometimes, the deeper truth is this: you changed first. And because you changed, your perception changed, your choices changed, your energy changed, your reactions changed, your path changed, your future probabilities changed, and that can feel like a glitch. Because when the old version of you begins to dissolve, the world you built around that version begins to flicker. So today, we are going to look at 5 signs you may be shifting timelines without realizing it. But more importantly, we are going to explore why these signs happen, not just what you are experiencing, but the mechanics behind the experience. Why the chills? Why the missing time? Why do familiar places feel unfamiliar? Why do old people suddenly feel energetically distant? Why do repeating numbers, symbols, and coincidences intensify during major life transitions? Why does reality sometimes seem to pause before a breakthrough? By the end of this episode, you will have a framework for observing these shifts without fear, because the goal is not to panic every time something strange happens. The goal is to become a conscious observer, not obsessed, not paranoid, not detached from reality, but awake, aware, present, able to recognize when your consciousness is moving from one energetic probability into another. So take a breath. Let the outside noise soften, and as you listen, do not force anything. Just observe, because observation is the beginning of collapse, and collapse is the moment possibility becomes reality. The scientific mystical foundation. Why timeline shifts feel like glitches. Before we get into the 5 signs, we need to understand the mechanics of a timeline shift. In spiritual language, a timeline is often described as a path of reality, a sequence of choices, events, people, emotions, and outcomes that unfold from a specific energetic state. In everyday terms, a timeline is not just where you are going. It is the version of life that becomes available to the version of you that you are currently being. That matters, because many people think shifting timelines means waking up in a completely different universe where everything is unrecognizable. But most timeline shifts are subtle. They happen through micro changes, a different impulse, a different decision, a different reaction, a different boundary, a different level of self-worth, a different emotional pattern, a different person you no longer chase, a different opportunity you finally notice, a different door that opens because you are no longer vibrating in the same internal state. The glitch happens because the inner self changes before the outer environment fully updates. There is a gap, a delay, a transitional field between the old reality and the new one. That gap is where glitches are felt. Now let's connect this to quantum language. In quantum theory, before a measurement is made, a system can be described as existing in a state of potential. This is often discussed through the idea of superposition, where multiple possible states are represented mathematically until observation or measurement produces a definite outcome. Again, we are using this symbolically here. Think of your life as a field of possible timelines. There are versions of you who stay in the same loop, versions of you who heal, versions of you who repeat the same relationship pattern, versions of you who leave, versions of you who build the channel, write the book, start the business, forgive yourself, reclaim your energy, or step into a completely different identity. All of those paths exist as potential. But your consciousness does not experience all of them at once. Your lived reality begins to organize around the timeline that receives the most consistent energetic agreement from you. That agreement comes from your attention, your beliefs, your habits, your emotional rehearsals, your identity, your nervous system, your choices, your repeated expectations. This is where the observer effect becomes spiritually powerful. In physics, the observer effect refers to the way measurement affects the system being observed. In spiritual transformation, we can interpret this as the principle that your conscious attention participates in shaping your experienced reality. Where your awareness repeatedly lands, your life begins to gather evidence. If you constantly observe yourself as trapped, reality begins to show you more walls. If you constantly observe yourself as rejected, reality begins to magnify every silence. If you constantly observe yourself as becoming free, you begin noticing exits, patterns, openings, and new choices you could not see before. Your observation does not magically control everything, but it changes what you notice, what you choose, what you tolerate, what you pursue, and what you collapse into form. That is the bridge. A timeline shift is not always reality changing like a movie scene. Sometimes it is the collapse of a new probability through a changed observer. The glitch is the moment your awareness catches the transition, the moment the old timeline loses stability, but the new one has not fully solidified. This is why timeline shifts can feel disorienting, because your mind is wired to maintain continuity. The brain likes familiarity. It uses memory, pattern recognition, and prediction to create a stable sense of reality. So when your energetic identity changes faster than your environment, the brain may experience that transition as strange. You may feel chills. Time may feel distorted. Places may feel unfamiliar. People may feel different. Your old life may feel like it belongs to someone else. This does not always mean something supernatural is happening, Sometimes it means your nervous system is updating. Sometimes it means your subconscious is releasing attachment to an old pattern. Sometimes it means you're becoming aware of choices that were always there, but hidden behind old programming. And sometimes, spiritually speaking, it feels like the timeline itself is bending. So the question is not, is every strange moment a timeline shift? No. The better question is, what pattern is changing in me, and what reality is beginning to respond to that change? That is how you observe without spiraling. You do not chase glitches. You track alignment. You do not become obsessed with signs. You become responsible for your state. Because timeline shifting is not about escaping your life. It is about becoming coherent enough to enter the version of life that matches your transformed consciousness. Now let's begin with sign number 1. Sudden chills, body waves, and energetic temperature shifts. The first sign you may be shifting timelines without realizing it is sudden chills, body waves, or strange energetic temperature shifts. This can feel like goosebumps rising across your arms for no obvious reason, a wave moving up your spine, a sudden cold sensation in the room, heat in the chest, tingling in the crown of the head, a shiver that seems to pass through the body right when you have a realization, hear a certain phrase, or make a decision internally. Many people dismiss chills as random. And yes, physically chills can happen for many normal reasons. Temperature changes, emotions, music, stress, fatigue, or the nervous system responding to stimulation. But in the mystical timeline-shifting framework, chills often appear when your body detects a frequency mismatch or a frequency confirmation before your logical mind catches up. Your body is not just a machine carrying your thoughts. Your body is an instrument of perception. It reads subtle changes in your environment. It detects emotional charge. It senses safety and danger. It responds to memory. It reacts to truth. It contracts around old patterns. It expands around resonance. So when you are moving from one timeline into another, your body may register the transition as a wave. Why? Because the body is where timelines become physical. Your mind may imagine a new life. Your spirit may desire a higher path. Your emotions may crave release. But your body is where the old timeline is stored. The body remembers the version of you who survived, the version of you who stayed quiet, the version of you who accepted less, the version of you who waited for permission, the version of you who expected disappointment, the version of you who learned to brace before good things happened. So when a new timeline begins to activate, it is not just a mental event. It becomes somatic, physical. You may feel chills because your nervous system is receiving a new signal. You may feel heat because old emotional material is rising to be processed. You may feel tingles because attention is gathering around a new possibility. You may feel pressure in the chest because the heart is being asked to open beyond the limits of the old identity. You may feel a wave up the spine because your body is recognizing a moment of energetic significance. This is why chills often happen during synchronicities. You think about someone, and they text. You ask for a sign, and a phrase appears in a song. You are about to make a decision, and your body suddenly reacts. You hear a truth, and your skin responds before your mind agrees. That is the body saying, "Pay attention, something is collapsing." Now let's bring in wave function collapse. In the mystical interpretation, your life contains many possible outcomes. When your attention, emotion, and identity align strongly enough with one possibility, that possibility becomes more available to your lived experience. The chills may happen at the moment your consciousness recognizes a probability becoming real. Not guaranteed, not forced, but activated. It is like your body feels the click before the external world shows the result. Imagine standing between two timelines. In one timeline, you keep repeating the old pattern. In another timeline, you finally choose differently. At first, both possibilities exist in your field. Then something happens. A realization, a boundary, a refusal, a yes, a no, a moment of clarity, a moment where you stop betraying yourself. And suddenly, one path becomes stronger. Your body reacts. Chills. A shiver. A strange stillness. That is the energetic signature of probability, collapse. The old timeline loses charge. The new timeline gains charge. Now here is where you must be careful. Do not treat every chill as a cosmic command. The body speaks, but the body also carries trauma, fear, memory, and stress. So your job is not to blindly obey every sensation. Your job is to observe the pattern. Ask yourself, what was I thinking when the chills came? What truth was being spoken? What decision was I avoiding? Did the chills feel expansive or contracting? Did they come with fear, clarity, peace, or pressure? Did they repeat around the same theme? This turns the experience into actionable mysticism. You are not just saying, I got chills, so it must be a sign. You are becoming a researcher of your own consciousness. That is the vortex path. Observe the body, track the pattern, test the alignment, move with grounded awareness. Because when timelines shift, the body often knows first. Before your mind has language, your nervous system may already be responding to the new frequency. And sometimes the chills are not random. Sometimes they are the first vibration of a future version of you entering the room. Missing time, time distortion, and reality lag. The second sign you may be shifting timelines without realizing it is missing time, time distortion, or the feeling that time is behaving strangely. This is one of the most talked about reality glitches. You look at the clock and it is 2:11. You answer one message, check something quickly, and suddenly it is 2:47. But it does not feel like 36 minutes passed. Or the opposite happens. You have a long, intense experience, but only 5 minutes have gone by. You drive somewhere familiar and arrive with almost no memory of the route. You enter a creative flow and lose track of hours. You wake up from a nap feeling like you were gone for an entire night. But only 20 minutes passed. Now again, let's ground this. Missing time can happen for normal reasons: distraction, fatigue, stress, routine autopilot, dissociation, sleepiness, or deep focus. If missing time is frequent, severe, frightening, or affecting your safety, it is important to speak with a medical or mental health professional. But spiritually, time distortion often appears during threshold states. A threshold state is a state where consciousness is between modes, between waking and dreaming, between old identity and new identity, between decision and action, between grief and rebirth, between one timeline pattern and another. In these threshold states, time may feel less linear because your awareness is no longer locked into the same internal rhythm. Think about this. When you are trapped in an old timeline, time often feels repetitive. Same thoughts, same routine, same emotional loops, same arguments, same fears, same waiting, same inner dialogue, same version of you waking up into the same energetic script. That kind of time is not just chronological, it is psychological, it is looped time. You are not only living through hours, you are living through repeated identity states. So when a timeline begins shifting, your relationship to time changes because your identity is no longer reinforcing the same loop. The old rhythm breaks. This can feel like missing time, not because time literally disappeared, but because the part of you that normally tracks continuity is not operating in the same way. The mind uses familiar patterns to measure time. When those patterns dissolve, time can feel slippery. Now let's connect this to quantum superposition. In the mystical model, before you choose a new identity fully, you may feel suspended between multiple possible futures. You are not fully in the old life. You are not fully stabilized in the new one. You are in a probability field. That field can feel timeless. Why? Because linear time is often experienced through commitment to a single narrative. When you know who you are, where you're going, what you believe, and what pattern you are repeating, time feels predictable. But when your narrative destabilizes, time becomes strange. A person leaving an old relationship may feel like 1 week lasts a year. Someone stepping into a new calling may feel like months of change happen in 3 days. Someone in a spiritual awakening may feel like their old life was yesterday and 10 lifetimes ago at the same time. This is not just poetic. It reflects how memory, emotion, and identity shape time perception. When your emotional state changes, time changes. When your attention changes, time changes. When your nervous system shifts from survival to presence, time changes. When you enter deep creative flow, time changes. And when you begin aligning with a different timeline, your old time markers may no longer hold. This is why some people experience reality lag. Reality lag is the feeling that your inner shift has already happened, but your outer world is taking time to catch up. You know you are done with something, but the external situation is still there. You feel called to a new life, but your current schedule still reflects the old one. You sense a breakthrough, but the physical evidence has not arrived yet. You feel like the new timeline is near, but not fully rendered. This lag can create time distortion, because internally you are already somewhere else. Externally, the timeline is still loading. This is the glitch. Your consciousness has moved ahead of your circumstances. Your field has changed before the physical arrangement has updated. And that gap can feel like missing time, compressed time, stretched time, or suspended time. So what do you do with this sign? You track it. When time feels strange, ask, what was I doing? Was I escaping, creating, healing, grieving, or awakening? Did I feel more present or less present? Did time distort around a person, place, decision, or realization? Was I in fear, flow, or transition? Because time distortion is not automatically a sign of elevation. Sometimes it means avoidance. Sometimes it means exhaustion. Sometimes it means your nervous system needs rest. Sometimes it means your consciousness is processing more than your mind can narrate. But if time distortion repeatedly appears around moments of clarity, transformation, deep presence, or major decisions, it may be a sign that your identity is shifting out of one time loop and into another. And here is the deeper truth. A timeline shift does not always announce itself with fireworks. Sometimes it begins when time stops feeling the same, because the old version of you measured time by waiting. The new version measures time by alignment. Small details. Change overnight. The third sign you may be shifting timelines without realizing it is noticing small details in your environment that seem to have changed overnight. This is the classic reality glitch experience. A picture looks slightly different. An object appears in a place you do not remember putting it. A street sign seems altered. A familiar room feels rearranged, even though nothing major moved. A phrase you remember one way appears another way. Someone recalls a conversation differently than you do. You feel certain a detail was one way, but now reality presents it another way. This can be unsettling, because the mind depends on continuity. Your environment is part of your identity anchor. It tells your brain, this is where you are, this is your life, this is familiar, this is stable. So when tiny details seem different, even if the change is small, it can create a deep internal ripple. Because the subconscious is not only reacting to the object, it is reacting to a perceived break in the story. Now, let's again stay grounded. Memory is not a perfect recording device. It is reconstructive. The brain fills gaps, edits details, and prioritizes meaning over exact accuracy. Many changed details may be memory errors, attention shifts, or simple oversight. But in the timeline-shifting framework, these moments can still be meaningful. Not necessarily because the object literally changed universes, but because your awareness has changed enough to notice reality differently. Sometimes what appears to be a changed detail is actually a changed observer. You are seeing something you previously filtered out. This is important. Your brain does not show you reality exactly as it is. It filters reality based on relevance. If you believe opportunity is impossible, you may overlook opportunities. If you believe love is unsafe, you may overlook safe love. If you believe you are stuck, you may overlook exits. If you believe life is against you, you may overlook support. The environment may contain more information than your old identity allowed you to perceive. So when your timeline shifts, your perceptual filter updates. Suddenly, details pop out. You notice symbols. You notice patterns. You notice repeated themes. You notice emotional tones. You notice who drains you. You notice who energizes you. You notice where your body contracts. You notice how your room reflects your old self. You notice how your habits are arranged like invisible architecture. This is why your physical environment may feel like it changed overnight, because you are no longer observing it from the same identity. In quantum-inspired language, the observer has changed, so the observed field feels different. The room is the same, but the consciousness measuring it is different. And because measurement participates in meaning, the reality you experience feels altered. This is one of the most powerful timeline signs because it often begins with small things. A book you never noticed on your shelf suddenly seems to contain the exact answer you need. A song lyric hits differently. A color keeps appearing. A number repeats. A person's tone feels different. A place you used to love suddenly feels heavy. A habit you used to accept suddenly feels unbearable. These are environmental glitches. They are not always proof that the world changed. They are signs that your relationship to the world changed, and that may be even more important. Because a timeline shift requires a new perceptual relationship with reality. You cannot enter a new timeline while reading the world through old filters. Imagine your consciousness as a searchlight. The old timeline trained your searchlight to look for danger, rejection, limitation, and repetition. The new timeline trains your searchlight to notice alignment, possibility, truth, and choice. Same world, different searchlight, different reality. This is why two people can live in the same house and experience completely different timelines. One sees only conflict. One sees healing. One sees endings. One sees initiation. One sees loss. One sees liberation. One sees chaos. One sees reorganization. The detail changes because the meaning changes. The meaning changes because the observer changes. The observer changes because identity changes, and when identity changes, timeline changes. So when you notice small details shifting overnight, do not immediately jump into fear. Instead, ask, what did this detail make me feel? What did I notice now that I ignored before? What part of my old reality does this symbol represent? Is my environment reflecting the old version of me or the emerging version? What is reality asking me to observe more carefully? This is how you turn a glitch into guidance. You do not obsess over whether the lamp moved 3 inches. You ask why your consciousness noticed the lamp today. You ask what is being mirrored. Because the external world is not just background. it is feedback. And when timelines shift, feedback becomes louder. The world begins to highlight the exact details your next version needs you to see. People feel different, even when nothing happened. The fourth sign you may be shifting timelines without realizing it is that certain people suddenly feel different, even when nothing obvious happened. This is one of the most emotionally confusing signs. Someone you used to feel connected to may suddenly feel distant. A friend may feel like they belong to an older chapter. A relationship may feel energetically complete before it physically ends. A familiar conversation may feel strangely empty. You may sit with someone and realize your body no longer relaxes around them. Or someone you barely noticed before may suddenly feel deeply aligned. This sign can bring guilt, because the mind says, but they did not do anything wrong. And maybe they didn't. Sometimes people do not have to betray you for the timeline to complete. Sometimes the resonance simply ends. A timeline is held together by agreements, not always spoken agreements, energetic agreements. The agreement to play a certain role, the agreement to be the rescuer, the agreement to stay small, the agreement to be available for chaos, the agreement to be misunderstood, the agreement to be the strong one, the agreement to repeat the same emotional exchange, the agreement to perform an outdated identity. When you shift timelines, those agreements begin to dissolve, and when the agreement dissolves, the connection feels different. Not because love was fake, not because the person is bad, not because you are superior, but because the frequency holding that dynamic together is no longer stable. This is where many people sabotage the shift. They feel the energetic difference and immediately try to pull the old connection back into place. They over-explain, they over-give, they perform the old role, they shrink, they apologize for growing, they return to the old timeline just to avoid the discomfort of relational change. But timeline shifting requires relational honesty. You cannot collapse a new reality while continuously feeding the social architecture of the old one. Now let's connect this to wave function collapse. Every relationship contains multiple possible versions. There is the version where you stay in the same dynamic, the version where you grow together, the version where you separate peacefully, the version where you finally speak truth, the version where the bond transforms, the version where the pattern repeats until it becomes unbearable. Your observation affects which version becomes available. If you keep observing yourself as powerless in the relationship, you collapse the same dynamic. If you observe yourself as worthy of clarity, the relationship field begins to change. This does not mean you control the other person. It means you stop collapsing the version of yourself that keeps the old timeline alive. That is the key. Timeline shifting is not about forcing people to match your new frequency. It is about no longer abandoning your frequency to remain compatible with an old pattern. When you change, people may react. Some will adjust, some will resist, some will disappear, some will reveal themselves, some will meet you in the new timeline. Some will only recognize the old you. And that can feel like a glitch, because someone who was once central to your reality may suddenly feel like a character from a previous life. You may still care for them, but the energetic charge is gone. You may still remember the bond, but you no longer feel pulled into the same script. You may hear them speak and realize the old version of you would have responded automatically, but the new version has nothing to say. That pause is sacred. That pause is where the timeline breaks. Because the old pattern needs your automatic reaction to survive. When you stop reacting, the old timeline loses fuel. This is why people can feel different overnight. Not because they changed, because you stopped measuring yourself through their expectations. You stopped collapsing into the identity they were used to. You stopped being the version of you that kept that relationship timeline stable. This is a powerful sign, but it requires maturity. Do not use timeline language to avoid accountability. Do not call people low frequency just because they challenge you. Do not disappear from people without compassion if a conversation is needed. Do not confuse discomfort with misalignment every time. Instead, observe. Ask, do I feel expanded or contracted around this person? Am I being present or am I performing an old role? Does this connection support truth or does it require self-abandonment? Am I avoiding them because they are misaligned or because they reflect something I need to heal? Can this connection evolve or is it complete? This is actionable mysticism. You are not just saying, my timeline changed, so everyone has to go. You are becoming conscious of relational resonance, and sometimes the glitch in your reality is not an object moving. Sometimes it is the moment you realize, I do not belong to the same version of this connection anymore. That realization can feel sad, but it can also be freeing, because every higher timeline has a relational frequency, and not every person from the old chapter can enter the next one in the same role. Synchronicities intensify before the shift stabilizes. The fifth sign you may be shifting timelines without realizing it is that synchronicities intensify before the shift stabilizes. This is when repeating numbers, symbols, phrases, dreams, songs, names, animals, or themes begin appearing everywhere. You think about a word, and someone says it. You keep seeing 111, 222, 333, or 555. A song follows you across platforms. A name appears in conversation, online, and in a memory. You dream about water, then water imagery appears all day. You ask for confirmation, and reality responds through repetition. Synchronicity is not just coincidence with decoration. In spiritual language, synchronicity is meaningful alignment between inner state and outer event. It is when reality seems to echo consciousness. And during timeline shifts, synchronicities often increase because your awareness is reorganizing around a new probability. Think of it like tuning a radio. When you are between stations, you may hear static, fragments, overlapping signals, pieces of one song and pieces of another. That is what a timeline shift can feel like. The old frequency is still present. The new frequency is coming in. The signal is not fully clean yet. Synchronicities are like signal locks. They show you where your attention and reality are beginning to align. Now, here is the scientific mystical bridge. In quantum-inspired language, your attention acts like a measurement device. Out of the vast field of possible information, your awareness selects certain patterns as meaningful. The brain then begins to notice those patterns more often. This is not necessarily supernatural. It is also how attention works. But spiritually, the mystery is not simply that you notice the symbol. The mystery is the timing, the emotional charge, the relevance, the way the symbol arrives exactly when your consciousness is open enough to receive it. This is why synchronicity feels different from ordinary pattern recognition. It lands, it has weight, it carries a kind of inner electricity. You may feel chills, you may pause, you may feel like reality just looked back at you. During timeline shifts, synchronicities may intensify because the old timeline is losing dominance. Your consciousness is scanning for confirmation of the new path. But here is the danger. People can become addicted to signs. They stop living and start decoding everything. They wait for numbers instead of making decisions. They ask the universe for confirmation but ignore their own behavior. They chase signs while avoiding action. They use synchronicity as entertainment instead of integration. That is not timeline mastery. That is spiritual distraction. Synchronicities are not meant to replace your agency. They are meant to refine your awareness. A sign is not the shift. A sign is a marker. The shift happens when your identity, choices, and energy become coherent with the new timeline. So when synchronicities increase, ask, what theme keeps repeating? What decision am I being guided toward? What old pattern is being exposed? What action would make me more aligned? Am I using signs to avoid responsibility? What is the repeated symbol asking me to embody? For example, if you keep seeing 555, you might interpret it as change. But the deeper question is, where am I resisting change? If you keep seeing doors, roads, bridges, or keys, ask, what transition am I being invited to cross? If you keep hearing the same phrase, ask, what truth is trying to reach me? If you keep dreaming about your childhood home, ask, what old identity structure is being cleared? This is how synchronicity becomes useful. It becomes a mirror for integration. Now let's connect it to wave function collapse. Synchronicities often appear when a probability is strengthening but not fully materialized. They are like pre-echoes of the timeline you are approaching. You are not there yet, but the signal is reaching you. That is why synchronicities can feel like breadcrumbs. But remember, breadcrumbs are meant to be followed, not worshipped. The higher timeline is not entered by collecting signs. It is entered by becoming the person who can live there. This is why synchronicity often intensifies before a major choice. Reality starts repeating the theme because your consciousness is approaching a collapse point. A collapse point is a moment where one possibility becomes more real than the others. You can feel it. Something has to give. A conversation, a decision, a release, a commitment, a truth, a boundary, a beginning. Synchronicities increase because the field is concentrating. The probability wave is narrowing. The observer is being asked to choose, and the choice may not be dramatic. Sometimes it is simply deciding, I no longer identify with the old story. That decision can collapse an entirely different path. How to track timeline shifts without fear. Now that we have covered the 5 signs, we need to talk about integration, because noticing glitches is only the beginning. If you do not integrate what you observe, the signs become noise. You may become overwhelmed, obsessed, or confused. So here is how to track timeline shifts in a grounded way. First, keep a timeline journal, not a fear journal, not a conspiracy journal, a consciousness journal. Write down, what happened? What did I feel in my body? What was I thinking about before it happened? What theme is repeating? What choice is being presented? What old identity is dissolving? What new identity is emerging? Second, track patterns over time. One chill may be random. One time distortion may be fatigue. One synchronicity may be coincidence. One changed detail may be memory. But repeated patterns around the same emotional theme may reveal a shift. The key is repetition plus relevance. Third, regulate your nervous system. A higher timeline is not accessed through panic. It is accessed through coherence. Breathe, sleep, hydrate, ground your body, spend time in nature, clean your environment, move slowly. Do not overstimulate yourself with endless decoding. Your nervous system is the instrument through which you perceive reality. If the instrument is overwhelmed, every signal becomes distorted. Fourth, take aligned action. This is where many people miss the shift. They receive signs, feel chills, notice patterns, and then do nothing. But the new timeline requires participation. If your body tells you a connection is complete, have the honest conversation. If synchronicities point toward a creative calling, create. If time distortion reveals avoidance, return to presence. If your environment feels misaligned, reorganize it. If your old identity feels heavy, stop feeding it. Action collapses probability, not just thought, not just wishing. Action. The universe may show you the door, but you still have to walk through it. Fifth, do not use timeline shifting to escape reality. This is important. True timeline shifting makes you more present, not less present. More responsible, not less responsible. More embodied, not more avoidant. More honest, not more delusional. More loving, not more superior. More aligned, not more detached. If your spiritual interpretation is making you fearful, isolated, paranoid, or unable to function, pause and ground yourself. Talk to someone you trust. Seek professional support if needed. The higher timeline does not require you to abandon your humanity. It asks you to inhabit it more consciously. Because the real glitch is not that reality is broken. The real glitch is that you were taught to believe the old version of you was permanent. It was not. You are allowed to update. You are allowed to evolve. You are allowed to collapse a new path. The glitch is the invitation. So let's bring everything together. The 5 signs you may be shifting timelines without realizing it are sudden chills, body waves, and energetic temperature shifts. Missing time, time distortion, and reality lag. Small details changing overnight or becoming strangely noticeable. People feeling different even when nothing obvious happened. Synchronicities intensifying before the shift stabilizes. But remember, the signs are not the destination. They are invitations. A glitch is not always proof that reality is falling apart. Sometimes a glitch is proof that your old reality can no longer contain your new consciousness. Sometimes the chills are your body recognizing truth. Sometimes missing time is your identity slipping out of an old loop. Sometimes changed details are your perception updating. Sometimes people feel different because the energetic contract has expired. Sometimes synchronicities intensify because a new probability is asking to be chosen. And this is where the observer effect becomes personal. You are not merely watching your life. You are participating in the collapse of possibility. Every day, your attention measures reality. Your choices narrow probability. Your beliefs filter perception. Your nervous system selects safety or expansion. Your identity decides what feels possible. The question is not whether you are shifting. You are always shifting. The question is, are you shifting unconsciously through old programming? Or are you shifting consciously through aligned observation? Because the timeline does not change just because you want it to. It changes when your being becomes coherent with a new outcome, when your thoughts, emotions, body, choices, and identity stop contradicting the reality you say you desire. That is when the field responds. That is when the old timeline loses stability. That is when the new path starts appearing, not always loudly, sometimes softly, through chills, through time, through symbols, through silence, through a room that feels different, through a person who no longer feels the same, through a small detail that catches your eye and whispers, "You are not where you used to be." So, if this video confirmed something you have been feeling, comment below, "I am observing the shift." And if you are ready to explore more about parallel realities, quantum consciousness, energy shifts and spiritual transformation, subscribe to Transmutation Vortex. This is not about escaping reality. This is about learning how reality responds when you finally stop abandoning your own evolution. The glitch is not the end of the world. It is the beginning of a new one. Welcome to the shift, when your thoughts, emotions, body, choices, and identity stop contradicting the reality you say you desire. That is when the field responds. That is when the old timeline loses stability. That is when the new path starts appearing, not always loudly, sometimes softly, through chills, through time, through symbols, through silence, through a room that feels different, through a person who no longer feels the same, through a small detail that catches your eye and whispers, "You are not where you used to be." So, if this video confirmed something you have been feeling, comment below, "I am observing the shift." And if you are ready to explore more about parallel realities, quantum consciousness, energy shifts and spiritual transformation, subscribe to Transmutation Vortex. This is not about escaping reality. This is about learning how reality responds when you finally stop abandoning your own evolution. The glitch is not the end of the world. It is the beginning of a new one. Welcome to the shift.